So for today, I really wanted to kind of try to focus on a hot topic conversation,
Okay.
which is all these LLM, AI, chatbot related stuff that's coming out.
Okay.
And so I think you've had, I know quite a bit of interaction with Claude and ChatGPT, and
Yes.
then I know you've done a little bit with Bard, but not a ton.
I've done enough with Bard to know that I like the answers from the other two better than Bard.
That's fair.
And apparently there's a new one called Grok now, just so you know.
Okay, I did not know about that one.
Elon Musk X has their LLM is called Grok. And unfortunately, it's kind of like the beer drinking version of an LLM. So it likes to be sarcastic. It likes to make um, crazy comments, and it will be inappropriate
Gotcha.
if you ask it to be.
Um, So I'm just kind of curious. I think the first thing I'd like to do is could you briefly kind of touch on because you and I were talking the other day about the history of these LLMs, and I think that would be valuable for people to be aware of and to know about is um the history that we've seen of the like why why is it? I guess for me, right? It's why is it that we went from not having okay. So, in my mind, it's like, why did we go from not having these LLMs to all of a sudden it seems like every few months there's another LLM, there's
Yeah.
another AI software system.
Yeah.
So, could you kind of just share briefly on the history, your knowledge at least, and
Yeah. Yeah.
your knowledge of the history of
Yeah.
that?
So what I've gathered from researching this in order to do prompt engineering and all that kind of stuff is that the LLMs themselves, we've been working on this for at least 30 years. Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
this goes back like to 1980, believe it or not. And people at that time, the big thing was hashes. Okay. So for searches, you create a hash number out of the data, and then that reduces the number of possible searches records you have to search through to find your data. Okay.
Okay.
That then moved to this concept of turning data into numbers,
Okay.
because if you have numbers, then you can do mathematical formulas on them.
Okay.
And so the LLMs, the core of this, is a group of people that I swear they spent at least 20 years, maybe longer, trying to figure out how to take the meanings of words and reduce them down to a number.
Okay.
All right. And so you can take any amount of text, give it all this text, and then it will reduce that into numbers. And then based on the numbers, you can tell what the meaning is of that text. All right.
Okay.
Then the next step
And so
after
that
that.
was the 1980s.
So that started in the 80s, but that really ran heavily in the 90s.
Okay.
And in the 2000s, they kind of got that working pretty
Okay.
good. And so the thing is now I can take your text, I can reduce it to a bunch of numbers, and I can take a question and I can reduce it to a bunch of numbers, and I can now find the intersection of those two numbers.
Okay.
So the
Gotcha.
tangent of those two numbers is the text that matches the answer to the question.
Okay.
All right. So that's fantastic.
Gotcha.
They got that working. But what's the difference between that and intelligence? Not a lot, you would think. There's this little step of just trying to get from there to actually giving a full response, right? Because I've got the information now, I can find it. But how do I give the response? How do I build a proper response? And
Okay.
and that was the big piece that 5, 6 years ago, I think it was, the fellow who's called the founder of AI, or godfather of AI, or grandfather of
And who
AI.
is that? Do
I
you remember?
can't remember his name now.
Okay. I'm gonna look it
You
up
got
real
to look
quick.
it up. Uh,
But anyway, so he figured out how to get the communication
he was the
backwards.
first one to figure out how to guess what the next word should be. So I was asked a question, how do I find it?
Are you talking about Jeffrey Hinton?
Hinton. Yes, Jeffrey Hinton.
Okay. So Jeffrey with a G Hinton
Right.
is the godfather of AI. Okay.
Yeah. And so he was one of the first people to figure out how to get it to predict words. It wasn't perfect, but it was usable.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, you actually got something that kind of made sense. So you took this text, you could do this lookup, and then based on the lookup, it would generate a response.
Okay.
Okay, and the response would make sense.
Gotcha. And so he created the so you had this work in the 80s to the 2000s on giving meanings to words and phrases, and then you had Jeffrey Hinton create the ability to do the response back as well.
Correct. To now take this matching that happened and now to generate the response. So generating the response is actually the foundation of all this AI. That's why all of this just happened all of a sudden. But the other reason it happened all of a sudden is Jeffrey, with a bunch of other universities, he took his findings and he shared it with the next guy. And the next guy shared it with the next guy and the next guy. And all of a sudden, there's universities all around the world.
Yeah, working on the exact same problem with the exact same shared knowledge base and everything.
Correct. And having some shared databases that they put together of
Yep.
phrases and encoded phrases and ways to encode things. And then trying to perfect how to get a response back.
Gotcha.
And so that's where all this AI came from. So really it's you ask a question, does it give the response that I would expect back?
Right.
Which is where I have problems with this AI general intelligence concept that everybody's going all bonkers about, is when you build a machine that gives you the response that you would expect to get back from it, is that real intelligence? Or is that just a machine, a very complicated machine giving you an answer that you want to hear?
Right.
Okay. And
But I mean, you can change. I mean, theoretically, you could change it to give the answer the prompt wants to have heard, right? I mean, that's how the chatbot
right.
systems
Well,
ultimately work. Is it gives a prompt that causes it to give back a meaning geared in the dialect or direction that you want it given.
correct. Correct. So, so a lot of this is I don't think it's quite as fantastical as what they say, but we'll see.
Right.
We'll see what happens, and it requires a lot of computing power.
So I'm curious, just real quick. Um, so I mean, I think the history is really great. I'm curious, just your own experiences with the systems. I know you love Claude. Could you just
Yes.
share briefly, like, why Claude is so valuable of a
Yeah.
system for you?
So, Claude is made by Anthropic, and Anthropic Systems was a bunch of people that were a part of OpenAI. They didn't like how OpenAI was handling the AI and how they were going about coding things, and they threw up their hands and they left.
Right.
And they said, "Well, forget you guys. We'll just take what's generally available and we'll make our own LLM."
Yep.
All right, and that's where Claude came from. I like Claude over ChatGPT because if you look at the way the responses come back for the same prompt, ChatGPT sounds like somebody who's got their hand being held behind their back and being told, you have to say the right thing. Make sure that you say the right thing. And there's this kind of this tension in the responses that you get from it.
But can't you adjust that with the prompt?
You would think, but again, exact same prompt, two different LLMs, very different responses. The responses from Claude are much more human-like. In other words, when it responds like, okay, you want to understand this. Okay, well, here are the things that you need to understand.
Right.
And Claude is really big about doing bullet points for things. So here are the key things that you need to understand, and this is why I understand it to be this way.
Right.
And it's always trying to help you understand what it's thinking, where ChatGPT is just trying to give you the right answer.
Right.
And it makes a big difference when you're trying to use it to write or trying to get it to, you want to expand. Like I have some ideas, right? And a lot of times when you have ideas, I don't know about other people, but I have like one-liners. I
Yeah.
have like these like really fantastic sentences that are like the topic sentence for your paragraph, but then you got to write the paragraph.
Yeah.
And Claude is really great at taking those topical type sentences and writing the paragraph.
Right.
Or taking those topical sentences and putting them in the proper order and writing paragraphs that then kind of flow and make sense.
Gotcha. Does anyone have access to Claude, or is it only specific?
Everyone has access to Claude now.
Okay.
There's actually free access for everyone.
Okay.
And then there is AI API access for
Developers and
yeah,
people who want
and
to
that's
utilize it.
that there's a cost associated with, which
Right.
is only fair and appropriate because I mean you've
They've
got
got a server somewhere that's running the machine that's creating all of this stuff. It's
that's
not literally just magic.
right, and somebody's got to pay for the computer and the computer time, electricity, and everything
Yep.
else,
All the maintenance costs.
and I don't have a problem with that. I think that's perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I think that's interesting. I actually have a much better opinion of Bard than you do. And I'm wondering now if it's not just because of my system, my way of using it. Um, so my personal experience is I would agree with you. I think Claude is a better. I think for writing related stuff, for interaction related stuff, as far as knowledge base, I think Claude is better than ChatGPT. For programming, I'm not enough of a programmer to actually make ChatGPT work, or Claude or Bard. But for programming, from my understanding, ChatGPT is a better system for it. Sounds like
Yes, and it would
out
be
of all of them.
right because again, it's got its
Um,
hand behind its back, and it's being told you have to give the right answer.
but
So
in a coding section, it seems like it's much superior
yes,
of a system. So if you have some code knowledge and you want to know how to maybe write an app or how to make this modification, or like we've even used ChatGPT, hey, for this software, how can we do this? And
right,
it's great at being able to give you those answers. And I think,
right,
excuse me,
exactly,
I
and
think for that resource, ChatGPT is superior to all of them so far.
yes,
Um, for Bard, what I personally like about Bard is two parts.
okay,
So the first part that I've really liked about Bard is it gives you the Google search option. So if it gives you an answer and you question the answer, it has a button at the bottom where you can press, and it's a Google button, and it'll then search that on Google, and it'll show you the references it used on Google for that point, and then you can go and watch your own videos or watch your own, or read the articles about whatever to like figure it out. Because I was working on some advanced statistical stuff
mhm,
from one of these articles I was reading, and so I
okay,
used Bard, and I was like, all right, dude, this doesn't make sense. I don't think this is right.
mhm,
It took me to the Google page, and then that gave me videos to watch on it that then allowed me to go, okay, yeah, Bard made a mistake in the math here, but I can verify it quickly and easily, and ChatGPT and Claude don't have those direct integration features.
well, ChatGPT has it if you run it through Microsoft's
Bing,
Bing browser
okay,
and Bing Chat.
okay,
Yeah, if you
they
do it through
may,
Bing Chat, and then there's links on there that you
yeah,
can literally this sentence came from
gotcha.
this source, and you can literally click on the
Um,
sources.
but
So
and then the other thing I like about Bard is that because we do have our system in Google for a lot of the docs that we write and
mhm,
Excel sheets that we create. I like the fact that Bard is able to directly interact with that.
mhm,
And that makes it really nice because I can be like, hey, Bard, create me I had it create me an RFP for hiring a videographer,
okay,
right? And it was able to take it, copy and paste into the Word doc, and then I just have in this Word doc now an RFP, and it tells me exactly this point, this point, and this point, right? That are bold and highlighted. You need to put whatever your
mhm,
specifications are. But I have basically that line of RFP created in
right.
30 seconds.
Yeah, and here's the tough part is that Claude actually has a plugin now for Google Sheets, and so I'm sure Google Docs will be just the next
Yeah.
step. So
Well, I think everyone's going to get there. I'm just saying Bard's
yeah,
already there.
right. Well, because it's
Um,
there's software. So
right. But that's my point is that they're already there. And I think one of the features that they've been advertising for Bard, which I'm excited to haven't used yet, but I'm excited for, is they're advertising taking a picture of like cookies and going and asking Bard, why did my cookies turn out looking like this? And then it will give you back a guesstimated response of like, hey, here are some options for why your cookies did not poof up. And I think that's kind of really a cool feature that I don't think ChatGPT nor Claude yet have implemented is that that answer question with photo stuff yet, from my understanding.
yeah, ChatGPT is very close.
I know they're close, but
Um,
they're still quite a
yeah,
bit of ways.
yeah. Facebook, their LLM is actually working on that sort of
Okay. But just as of today, right?
thing.
As of, November 9th, 2023, I think there's some elements to come. But I personally like Bard for that reason.
Mhm.
Is those two things. Um, so the final thing I kind of want to touch on real quick is what do you think the future is of these systems when it comes to marketing?
Boy, I'm telling you, it's kind of tough because on one hand, you have the ability with these systems and some of the graphics and movie things that are coming out to really for anybody with minimal cost actually do a nice high quality video, okay, or take a video and clean it up and make it look better. So like
Sh-
if you've got washed out areas, fix the washed out areas and all that kind
Yep.
of thing in your video. So you can have these really high quality videos without necessarily knowing all the ins and outs of it.
Yep.
Um, the LLM piece, I think, is going to be a way to interface with a lot of things and help people really. How can I put it? A lot of times people have ideas or they get lists of what I need to do,
Yeah.
and they need something to kind of fill that in.
Mhm.
And I think um, all of these LLMs are going to go a long ways to helping people do that, which is going to increase office productivity. So now I want to write a paper about this topic, and this is what I know, and this is what is important to me. These are the unique things that I've learned about this. This
Sure.
is what everybody says, but this is a unique thing I've learned about this and what I feel is really truly important. How do I write a paper like that?
Sure.
Can you write me a sample paper? And then you kind of have something to work off of that you can then modify and work in your own language and say, well, no, that's not right. Or
So do you think AI writing's the future of all websites ultimately?
I think it's going to be a part of the content of every website. It'll be more for people who use traditional web designers than folks that use people like us, where we actually focus on the content first and the
Sure.
web design second. Um, Most web designers say to the business owner, the typical business owner, that to give me the content,
Right.
and business owners can't. Now
Right.
with these AIs, the business owner can provide the content.
Gotcha. Um, I mean, you use it though for our content even today, right? I mean,
Yes,
you use it quite a bit for our
but
content.
I use it to expand and humanize the content that we write, because a lot of times we have ideas and we have specific points we want to get to or want to express, but expressing those in human readable language is sometimes quite the challenge.
Making it less jumbled for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, or sometimes you can write something, but it's so terse that nobody wants to read it.
Yeah.
It doesn't really flow.
Yep.
Um, and I think for that, that's going to be huge. It's going to help a lot of the more scientific mind, where people have got great new ideas that nobody is aware of,
Or
and
doesn't
trying to
understand them.
break it down and explain it in simple ways for various audiences. So
Yeah.
for your fellow co-scientist, co-worker, whatever peer,
Yep.
you can write it this way, but for the general public, you need to say it this way,
Right.
and helping people to kind of see what that means and how you can
I
do
mean,
that.
I
And
will say I think on that regards, one of the things I actually found really useful for ChatGPT that I was using the other day was for creating analogies.
yes,
So I was talking to it about, Bill Nye the Science Guy, and I was going, what made Bill Nye, I was, talking to it about like what made Bill Nye the Science Guy like so relatable. Like what made his because I for my generation, and people a little bit older than me, I feel like his educational stuff was like in every school.
right,
His videotapes were in every school
right,
class for
right,
many, many
yes,
years. It was incredibly popular. It
right,
was in the
yeah,
libraries. And so I was like, what made it relatable, right?
hmm
Like and it was able to start listing out like different examples of analogies that he used and how that was a household item and how that was a normal everyday experience, right? And how
hmm
that was, etc. And I was like, that's actually a really insightful. And so then I started asking it for analogies on other things that I was thinking about in marketing terms. And it was really great at being able to just give me different ideas of like different analogies to possibly help connect to the consumer, and
hmm
take this very theoretical, very like mental, mind and put it in a term that everyday life happens,
right,
experience. And I thought that was really insightful,
yeah.
and nice. Um, what do you see? So I mean, as far as talking, it's going to be there. We already got video editing and video creation that it's doing more
And
or
image
less, right?
creation.
What do you see as like the key for people when they comes to utilizing it today for the everyday business owner?
I'm a little apprehensive for that because, as a business owner, you want to have one tool that you use over and over and over.
Yep.
If you need a hammer, I want a hammer. I want to use the same hammer every day. I don't want to have a different hammer every day. And the problem we're running into right now is with the LLMs at the place we're at the place where this is all new, fantastical,
Yep.
never been seen before kind of thing. And there are so many developments by so many different people
Yep.
going so fast. It's almost like you use one tool this week. Next week, there's a different tool you really should use. That'd be the best tool. And the week after that, it's a different tool. And the next month it's a whole suite of tools.
Yeah.
And you, as a business owner, you can't be chasing every shiny thing
Right.
and get anywhere. And that's where I really feel like the rub is. So I think what business owners really need to do is say, where am I really spending my time? Where are my people spending their time?
Right.
Is it by communicating, trying to talk to each other, right?
Yep.
Or talk to customers? Or is it in certain mechanical type things, process type things? So if it's our process and we know our process isn't quite perfect, maybe using an LLM to share your process with it, right?
Sure.
And have it work through your process with you for you to be able to see where the issues
Well, it
are.
sounds like what you're talking about is trying to use it as a thinking partner, more or less.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's what I really see as a consistent use case. Because regardless of which LLM, even though you'll get different answers from each one, some you'll find are a lot better
Yep.
partner with me because of the way I work, the way I think, and then another one. So even though I love Claude, I think Claude's the greatest
Sure.
thing for any sort of oral communication or somebody you want to bounce ideas off from. There is value to the others, Bard and ChatGPT, and now
So I'm curious,
Grok.
we've got, we've kind of talked about like that, the value of like the LLM piece. What do you see as far as tech space, and SAS companies? How do you see them? Do you think that they all need to start integrating these LLMs and coming up, taking the APIs and implementing into their system, or do you think they have time to wait? Because like, I'll share my own personal, example and experiences. Paul and I were talking about for his construction company how they banned it, and he's really upset because he was using it to basically just take his spreadsheets, and rather than having to do this like all this X lookup or this and that, just feeding all that into ChatGPT and then basically asking it questions. Hey, this project, how many bolts do I need to order for this project if we have, you know, if based upon this information, and it'll take and it'll see how many bolts they have and it'll see how many, right? And he's able to just do all that kind of stuff. And so rather than it being a humanized, like looking through the Excel sheets or doing, this or that, he's able to just basically have all that info from the, Chat GPT get spit at him as he asks questions,
Mm-hmm.
right? For whatever he needs in the moment.
Right.
And I see Bard as being something to be able to do that as well.
Right.
With the,
Right.
with direct access and stuff. I see that. I look at
Right.
HubSpot and Dharmesh was talking about how, I don't know I don't know where it went. I know like 6 months ago he was doing beta testing for integrating ChatGPT into HubSpot. So instead of you having to go through your HubSpot account and look for this and that, you can literally just type into this chatbot feature whatever it is you want to look on your sales team. So sales managers could be like, hey, how many calls did Dada make? Hey, how many sales did Dada make?
Mm-hmm.
And never have to leave this one platform situation. Instead of having to individually go to these people's tabs and go through all this extra work, you can just from here ask the question, get your answer.
And that's where that's the kind of thing that is going to be integrated into everything.
Okay.
Everybody has to do it.
So you think it's going to become a necessity for all SAS companies ultimately
Yes.
somehow?
I don't care who you are. Yes, because think about all the analytics. How valuable do you understand analytics to be?
I mean, I think analytics are incredibly valuable,
Okay.
but I also
How many people do you find that you think really understand analytics? Very few is the right
so
answer.
no. So it gets complicated. Okay. And I want to say it gets complicated for two big reasons when
Okay.
it comes to analytics. Number one, there's very few people that understand statistical math in general,
Right.
okay, or any level of high-end math like that.
Right.
It's a very small population
Right.
unless you're in certain groups, and then it
Right.
feels like everyone. Outside of those groups, it's a very small population, so it's a small group that even understands math. But on a secondary level, most people who understand math and statistics, very few of them understand reasonable thinking and life psychology, I guess is how I would put it.
Mhm.
And so there tends to be this approach of, okay, well, this is how we can solve for this. And it's like the one problem I was working on, with ROI of this quality stuff. I'm going, well, realistically, they overcomplicated the process because they wanted to make a super fancy statistical math thing. So it's overcomplicated more than it needs to be, number one. Number two, it's inaccurate because it's looking predictively further than you can actually predict. And then number three, there's variables that they're missing that they're not taking into account for that like they're assuming that this is the case, but this variable is changing incredibly well. And you can't just try to quantify that variable without looking at these other aspects, if that makes sense.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is that's where LLMs excel, is making it so that people can ask simple questions and get answers without having to do all the
The
complex
statistical,
back end.
but only if it's based. But my thing is that I'm trying to get at is that only if there's a statistical model that meets it. So if there's a current statistical model, yes. But I'll use sabermetrics for example. When I forget the guys' names, but these guys basically created the ability to use two cameras to figure out the placement of a ball.
Okay.
That created a whole new level of analytics that changed the entire dynamic of sabermetrics in baseball. Because now for pitchers, they were able to start judging spins of balls, and they were able to start judging points where it started, points where it ended, and all this other stuff. And it changed the sabermetrics and allowed these guys to just totally blow up, and they're in their what they're able to do. And so my point is that there's a whole new statistical model that they end up creating because there's now this new data that we could add into the system.
Right.
Your ChatGPT, your etc. If it can take a current statistical model and you can give it your data and it can give you an answer that's amazing. And it really is amazing, right?
Right.
Or Google, you can create a spreadsheet to give you this answer if you put in your data. I love it. But it's only if the statistical model works. If I gave it, so I give it like a forecasting one, okay?
Mhm.
Because I want to see how it forecasting compared to me. It forecasts based upon statistical data that has traditionally been done for forecasting, which is different than the way I did my forecasting, right? I use standard deviation as a variable into the formula to affect it. I also used last year's data at a different variable, as well as I adjusted how I looked at everything based upon the first 3 hours, right? It did not have that data model or that statistical model to utilize. So
Right.
therefore, it could never have forecasted the way I forecasted.
But the thing is that if you
That's my only point. It's,
right,
it's like you've got to have the statistical model in place for it to work.
right, but that's what we keep talking about is the creative part is the human part.
Yeah.
So the human determines that there's this statistical model and these are the factors and now the LLM can go make it happen.
Yes, I would agree there.
And that's the power. That's
Yep.
that's why it's going to be integrated into everything is
Gotcha.
that you come up with it once. You don't necessarily even have to write the code per se. You have to just be able to
Gotcha.
describe the process that it needs to
Yeah.
go through and everything happens.
Gotcha. Right.
And that's
S- But you do believe that this integration of everything is going to become a future more or less of every SAS company
everything is going to have AI in it
ultimately.
ultimately because everything from your word processor or your spreadsheet all the way down to your
Okay.
email responses. Think about that. Think about customer service. A lot of your customer service.
Um, so my follow-up question would be because I want to stay on topic real quick, and I want to try to make this one a short one. But when it comes to AI, what do you think the business owners need to be aware of today? Because there's all these classes that are going on about, hey, Dada AI expert talking to you about what you need to do for AI. Dada expert telling you how to use AI. Dada expert telling you how to increase the efficiency with AI. And so there's all these talks going on, you know, and I some of them I feel like are probably a waste of your time. just you know, I don't know how valuable they really could be.
Mhm.
So if you were to go, hey, look, this is what you should look into as a small business owner, what would you say are like the big things to look into when it comes to these AI stuff?
Well, what I would do is I'd identify the problems that I'm trying to solve,
Okay.
okay? And then I would go, as bad as it sounds, go to YouTube
Yeah.
and say AI whatever,
Okay.
or how does AI help with whatever the
Sure.
topic is, and see what somebody's done, because odds are somebody's creating an AI that does something along those lines.
Right.
And now you can see what your options are.
Okay.
I mean, like right now, there's two big pushes. One of them is documents. It'll take your company documents, put them into AI, and have them locally on a local server, and have your people be able to look up stuff via AI
Yep.
and find your documents for like customer service and that kind of thing. Um, and the other big push is for something called AI agents, which is basically AIs do well when they play roles. So if it plays the role of a marketing expert, or the role of a copywriter, or a role of a manager, whatever it is, it does a good job of giving you a good answer when it plays that role.
Mhm.
And with the AI agents, a lot of times a single task that you need, a very simple thing you say, I just need this done.
Yeah.
Well, you need somebody to help you establish what the real goals are, right? And then
Sure.
once you have the goals, you might need 5 or 6 different skill sets
Gotcha.
to solve it. And these LLMs now will build those 5 or 6 different
Gotcha.
experts you need
Sure.
and give them each a piece of this task to this overall thing, and have them go off and do whatever they got to do, and then bring their answer back.
So, what I'm hearing is basically thinking partner and then different tasks that you do that are repetitive that a machine should be able to repeatedly do for you.
Repetitive, or where you've got to pull information from a lot of different sources.
Okay. Um, any so how so you said to create a list of what problems you have and then basically YouTube what those, AI does X to see if there's something out there or what is out there to solve that issue. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Um, as far as a thinking partner, any thoughts or suggestions on that one as far as like should they just go and use the different systems and just see what they like, or how would you suggest going about that?
Uh,
Because I know you've learned for yourself, prompting's huge,
yeah,
and
and having the right
the
prompt
right
to choose.
questions and the right.
Right. That's one of those difficult questions, because my background is in programming. I don't mind being a prompt engineer, going through the learning process of learning how to do that. Most people aren't going to be up to that.
Right.
Um, in the next few months, like I found one prompt that works really, really good. That does a good job of figuring out what you want, and then creating an expert to
Mm,
help you with it.
yeah.
Okay, just fantastic. Um, but there's going to be more and more of that, where there's going to be AI prompts, and a lot of it's going to be free.
Yeah.
That, again, just find it on YouTube. Somebody's talking about it. Um, that find something that works for you,
Right.
and just be able to kind of plug it in to get better answers. I mean, you can do ask answers the way you do now, but the biggest problem it needs is it needs to know what role do you want it to play, and what are the actual things that you want, goals that you want to accomplish,
Right.
and then ask your question,
Gotcha.
kind of
Um.
thing.
Okay. And then, so I guess my final question would be is what have you seen as the biggest impact for you having played around with these systems and on our business with these systems?
Biggest impact for me has just been, I don't know how to say it. Part of it's ideas.
Okay.
Part of it is just being able to be insightful. Like, a lot of times you have a document and you read it through it, and I'm not really sure what this means, And with the chatbot, you can drop it in and say, okay, this document that I have that you just
Yep.
read, summarize it for me,
Right.
you know, um, or tell me the key points, or I'm concerned about this aspect, or
Right.
there was this verbiage used. A lot of times you might be reading a contract that you were given by someone, okay? And there's some language in there, and it just sounds odd.
Yep.
And you can cut and paste that sentence or whatever out of there, put it into your chatbot, say, "Hey, I'm reading a legal document about this. As a lawyer, could you explain to me what this means?
Sure.
What are the obligations of me as the tenant or me as the
Yep.
whatever
No,
provider?"
I like all of those suggestions, and we have used it for all of those suggestions. I know we've also used it for creating like privacy policies
Yes.
and other things that are just repeatable legal related stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you've gone through it and
Yeah.
checked it, and lawyers have checked it, but just for getting the ball rolling and the ideas rolling, it's been nice and valuable
Yeah.
for that.
Well, it's a lot less expensive to have an attorney review a document that you have than to write it from scratch.
This is true. Absolutely.
And it's also nice a lot of times that you have writer's block as a business owner because I know I need to write this thing, but it just feels awful. It's painful.
Yep.
Can you just write it?
Yeah.
Here's what it has to include. Here are the things that I care about, right?
Yep.
And then what else do I need to put in
Yep.
here?
And then my follow-up question for you, that I'm curious about your thoughts on is I know we have our chatbots, and our chatbots still react differently than if you were to just ask Claude or just ask ChatGPT, right? The
Correct.
same
Correct.
questions. Like
Correct.
our chatbots, and I've played around with them enough to realize like it's pretty significantly different. The
Yes.
interaction that you're able to have with our chatbots versus like a ChatGPT or
Right.
Claude or something else. What is the difference? And like why does it matter, do you think still? Right? Now that you've
Yeah.
played around with all these systems, do you think it matters
Mhm.
what we create with the
Yeah.
chatbots?
Well, I still trying to get our chatbots on Claude because I think if we put them on Claude, they would give even better answers. Right now, we're using ChatGPT, um, and a lot of it is just prompting, is having the right prompt that gives the right background and right perspective. So our the biggest problem I had when creating the chatbot was how do I take our philosophy, our view of marketing, and tell the chatbot that this is the view of marketing I want you to respond from,
Yeah.
rather than something generic or
Yep.
off the wall or
Yep.
whatever it happened to
Yep. Yep.
think was the top answer
Gotcha.
today.
Right.
Today, this moment kind of thing, and follow our philosophy, and then take regular marketing knowledge and apply it to that. And that's why you get significantly different answers and significantly better answers.
Gotcha. Um, and then my follow-up question to that is like, why do you think it's not an end all be all for a business owner? Or why do you think? Let me phrase my question. We've used it as a bounce ideas off of. We've used it to write our content. We've used it to help create legal documents to a degree,
Mhm.
right? Before getting reviewed, but we still are using ourselves for a lot of the ultimate ideas of what direction we're doing or what how we actually want to do different things.
Correct.
It's not our sole, like, this is our Bible for what we
Right. Well,
utilize.
it's not like this is what I need a document on or I need a blog on this subject.
Yeah.
Write the blog.
Yeah, yeah. It's not, or it's not even, hey, what ads should we be running?
Right.
Right? Like, it doesn't. Why not? Because
Because
I know some of it is a lack of a creativity, right? Some of it is obviously markets change, people change more rapidly than
mhm,
the LLM's aware of, and your market, your little market people you're going after may be different. But like, is that all there is to it?
there's the other piece and there's the feeling piece.
Okay.
Because as good as these guys have done at taking numbers and trying to equate
Meaning.
meaning to numbers, okay, take this meaning and these feelings that somebody has and equating them to numbers so that it can look it up. When you read something, there's an emotional feeling that you get.
Yes.
Okay, the chatbot doesn't have that. The chatbot has meaning of this is what this means, but it doesn't have an emotional connection to those words
Right.
or that that phrase. And that is a part of it is what you were grown up with,
Sure.
what you're brought up with, what you've experienced, right?
Yep.
Um, and some of it's cultural.
Yep.
You know, the culture I grew up in, in American culture, everybody thinks, Americans have
Well,
this
American culture, Southeast American, Midwest American, Northeast American, West Coast American, Pacific Northwest.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
all
All
different,
all very
very
different
different. But and
associations with
then
certain
on
things.
top of that, then that's not the same as the Philippines
Yep.
or Mexico
Yep.
or Europe
So you
or
just think that it's incapable of just understanding all of the meanings out there.
well, that's the problem. And then that's the thing is that this concept of feeling,
Yeah.
which is what allows us to create unique content that
Right.
is uniquely different, is what it's missing. So if you can verbalize it, if you come up with words to properly express your feelings, and there's some people out there like that,
Right.
then these chatbots are like, oh, because you can express your feelings to them. They can say, "Oh, I know what those feel, what words you would use for that." And then for this situation, this is the words that you would use for
Right.
that because this is related to that, and so on.
But it's still all from a very numbers based system,
It's
which is
exactly
very different than a human based system that is beyond the numbers to a degree.
it's
Like there's just some other intrinsic elements that
yes,
just
the numbers aren't always the same,
yeah.
and that's one of the things that like I was talking to you about in the other video we did is that the embeddings, what numbers they actually use for what meanings of words, those are different with every chatbot potentially. A lot
Right.
of them are very similar because they all kind of came from the same group. But by changing those embeddings and how you turn
Mm,
meaning into numbers,
yeah.
you can get very different
Gotcha.
chatbots and very different
Yeah, yeah.
responses.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so we're like so far, people have no concept of how early we are in the process. We are at this very, very, very elemental beginning stages of just gaining a bare awareness
Right.
of what could possibly happen
So
now.
it looks really amazing. It is amazing to a degree, but from your perspective, it's still way too early to be acting like this is the end.
This is not a person. This does not have feelings and the ability to take disparaging things that have nothing to do with each other.
Right.
But we associate the two together because they have the same feeling about them.
Right.
So a lot of the analogies, when you
Yep.
think about analogies, two things that generate the same feeling but are completely, you would never
Mm,
equate the two
yeah, yeah, yeah.
by word.
So on that note, I just wanna make sure I end it, effectively. So basically our takeaway from the chatbots and AI and everything is prompts are key. Taking a little bit of time to go on YouTube and look at some different prompt options or take a look through, blogs that we
Yeah.
write on it and look at the prompt options is
Yeah.
valuable.
Or hire somebody who will actually write prompts for you. That's the other option.
Okay. It's great for as an assistant and idea maker.
Yep.
It's great as a doing things that are repetitive to a degree. There's
Yes.
possibly software out there to use that. It's great as a way to take a database of knowledge and be able to interact with it whenever how you want, however question you want to ask it versus the database having sifting through the database basically,
Right.
right? And then we're talking about it's really great for any small business owner to you look at it to consider how they can solve their problems through AI, right? And
Yes.
whatever that problem is, just because there may be something out there, there's probably something out there to help solve those problems.
Right. Or it may give you ideas or say, hey, this is the direction or
Yep.
this is what that's called. The solution for that is really called
Gotcha.
this. Now you can go research somebody who does
Gotcha.
whatever it is.
No, I love that. Okay. I think that covers everything. Unless you think we need something else.